Okay, I am Rosie So. A lot of you know me as Rosie Hunnam. I got married last year, but I did my name. I've just changed it because it was getting really annoying having two names. So I'm in person. I'm just married now, and whatever that means. So I have to student opportunities at NUS. So my role covers student media, sports, clubs and societies, student fundraising, and anything to do with student volunteering. And I am a staff member at NUS, and I'm joined today by my colleague Andy. So do you want to introduce yourself?
Everyone, my name is Speed, as you can see up on the slide. I'm a student engagement and partnership consultant, and we cover everything student engagement, anything that can get a student's experience while they're at a university and their chance of succeeding and sort of being able to integrate properly with their experience and their university time. We look at that, which is why we're interacting today on this one about academic societies.
Yeah, thank you. If you haven't already, if everyone can introduce themselves in the chat bar and just say who you are, which union you're from, what your role is, and if it isn't obvious, if you can tell us what your role covers, that would be really helpful, because then we'll keep a record of the chat bar, so it's really interesting for us to see the types of people in the room, but it's useful for you to kind of look at what other people are doing in other unions. And if you can do that, it will also get you used to using the chat bar, because we're going to encourage you to ask questions and give us some of the answers to some discussion points later on. So today is the first student opportunities themed webinar. NUS runs a webinar program every year, and we've just started this year's program. So I think the first webinars were last week, or maybe even 2 weeks ago. We've run webinars in the Student Opportunities team for about 2.5 years, and I know there's quite a few of you in the room that have attended a few of those, so thanks to the regulars. But there's also a lot of new people, so welcome, and I'm really glad that you joined us today. Hopefully it'll be useful for you. There's loads of webinars running across the year, so we've got the programme scheduled up until Christmas. And on average about 2 a week, and sometimes 4 webinars a week that's been organised by our learning and development team. So make sure, if you haven't already, have a look at those and see if there's any others that are interesting to you, because we want you to engage with them and use them as a learning opportunity. Today, to take notes, have a chat with colleagues if you're sat in the same room as them and they're also listening. Ask questions, so if Anne or I say something that you don't understand or that you want more clarification on, please ask, because it's a difficult webinar for us to know whether you're kind of getting it or not, because we can't see your face. So let us know, and also let us know if something's particularly useful or if you think we're really boring, although it'd be nice, because, you know, we've put some time into preparing this. And yeah, hopefully you're introducing yourselves on the screen now, so that's helpful. There's quite a lot of you, which is nice. So I'm going to show you a little bit of webinar etiquette. So I'm recording now, so whoever listens back to this has to listen to me waffling on for the first 5 minutes. So if you kind of want to listen to it again, or if you want to pass it on to colleagues, there'll be a recording on YouTube afterwards that will also be put up on NUS Connect. As on the screen, we can't hear you. The way we run these is so that you participate through the chat bar. And so do make sure you're getting used to using that. And Andy and I will try our best to keep an eye on the chat bar. There's a little buttons at the top of the chat bar, so I've got you all to put your hand up, but there's also a tick and a cross, so that's basically if you like something or don't like something, and you can also do a bit of an emoji, which is fun. So kind of use that if you want to. So free to have a chat with someone, take notes. We can't hear you, so that's fine. Eat your lunch if you need to, but do try and focus. So switch the email off if possible. For 2 reasons. Number one, it might slow down the webinar, but also it's difficult for you to focus if you're also listening, if you're kind of half keeping an eye on your email. And please ask questions and participate, because that's the best way to learn. I'm really keen today. Andy's laughing at me. So today we're going to talk about two main things. We're going to mostly Andy's brain and the stuff on the slides, understand kind of some of the current thinking that the Student Engagement Partnership have been doing and that we've been doing at NUS around academic societies, engagement, partnership. We're also going to talk about belonging, aren't we?
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll have some thoughts on that too. And then we're going to think a little bit about different ways that you might structure and support your academic societies. And hopefully you'll be able to share some of those that you do it in your union as well. So it won't just be stuff from us, it will be stuff from you. And basically just have a bit of a chat about what's going on with academic societies. If you've got any questions that you definitely want answering in this webinar, you know about now, pop them down in the chat bar and we'll try and cover it in the content. If we can't cover it now, we'll email out about that afterwards. So if you've got any kind of burning issues or questions that you want to talk about straight, then pop them down now. So let's get into some content. Societies are great because so those of you that have been part of the kind of Learn gang for a few years will notice that this is the second time we've talked about academic societies. So we did it one about 2 years ago. And so actually, this is really one of our more popular lunch and learn topics. And we kind of thought that it would be nice to start off by thinking why we like talking about academic societies. So a few reasons here that we're going to run through. I think it's a great place to start. So if you are looking to improve your student opportunities as a whole, or if you know that your societies need improving, or if you want to start doing some more innovative practice, academic societies are a really good place to start. There's often some quite clear structures in place. So if, for example, you have got many societies and you want to increase that, you look at all of the different ways, the way that your kind of academic, your kind of learning is structured, and you can think about how academic societies might fit into that. And also, there's usually a captive audience of students that are fairly easy to find, because if you've got English society, you then can find the English students and work out how you're going to talk to them and how you're going to get them to be involved, because you'd expect that they might be interested. So that's one reason why I think it's great. It's easy to run a variety of different activities. So if you've got a football club, they're going to be fairly restricted to football and perhaps doing some socials and maybe a bit of team building stuff. Whereas actually with academics or course-based societies, there's necessarily one clear activity that they're going to be doing. It's more around creating a community for the course or for that school. So the kind of variety of stuff that can be covered is amazing. I got on Twitter this morning by Greenwich's History Society, and so I was having a look at some of the activities. It's really diverse, and there's things that are relevant to their society, so kind of history trips and that kind of thing, but then also loads of different types of social activity, and there's quite a lot of crossover here, which are the next point on the slide around being able to work across the Students' Union. So we're going to talk today quite a lot about kind of presentation side and where it links up with some of the Student Engagement Partnership do. But there's also lots of opportunities to link up with sports. So I know a lot of union societies also run football teams, like an intramural league, or they also run different types of clubs and activities within their society. James has asked, what do you think about academic clubs replicating another club, so sports club, etc. activities? But I think it's useful as a way of getting people who are already a community and already working together and enjoy that social environment to then something different. And if that's that they go and run an intramural football league within your different academic societies, I think that's a good thing, because you're getting them doing different stuff. It might be the first time that someone in that society has actually taken part in university or college sports, so that's good. Think about that.
It's speaking to the next part there about where students feel comfortable. So it's an environment where students recognise what's around them and they understand what it is, but setting within the environment that you're talking about there. So it might be that they recognise that a club and their activities is, say, where your sports club is and what they're doing, and by mirroring that within the academic sense, they will recognise it as a social activity and therefore put it on a par with that, but in the academic sense. It's what we sort of mean around students feeling comfortable. Your parts within your unions and things will be within the representation or the engagement, the democracy side. They're always looking at ways where they can find places students are willing to talk about things, or where they can interact with students and how they can get them to take part in their processes and their procedures, and feed into structures and strengthen up and beefing up the voice making through their activity. One benefit that you guys have through academic societies or through the social aspect, students are voluntarily bringing themselves to these arenas and these societies because it interests them and they're comfortable in these settings, which leads to a little bit in a little while around the belonging stuff, so I'll come back to that. But it's essentially your students are choosing to engage with it at this point. So what it actually looks like, from my point of view, it just needs to be comfortable to them. So if that means mirroring, then great. If it means something completely different, then okay, it's not really an issue. It's the fact that there's something there. And as the sort of last point there, sort of, it's a chance for them to talk about serious stuff. They see the academic side as sort of the reason why they're there, which again I'll come on to in a minute when we talk about belonging. But for them to do that in an environment they feel comfortable and where it feels natural to them, as opposed to unknown or abnormal, or where they're not quite sure if what they're contributing is correct or incorrect. In scenarios, it being incorrect, it just makes sense for them because it's social and it's non-formal and it's choosing to do it in this environment here. So yeah, that's why. Okay.
Really, we think they're fantastic. If anyone has any other reasons why you think they're good or useful, interesting, stick them down. That's really helpful for us to see what you think about it. There's been a little bit of chat while we've been talking. Kath talked a bit more around her history society, because Kath's from Greenwich, the stuff that they've been doing links with their Give It a Go programme. So it's really interesting. And Andy's talked about the intramural sports programme being accessible for societies. It's not only at elite level, so it's really interesting. I think, like, just to talk about the replication thing, obviously if your football club, for example, already owns an intramural football league, then link it up with that. Don't create a whole separate league. It depends on kind of what works for your structures. But I think as long as you're keeping people in the loop about it and showing, and not making your existing football club feel like they're being replaced, then I don't think it's a problem at all, and it can be really beneficial. So feel free to stick down any other reasons why you think societies are useful. Keep giving us this stuff, like giving us examples from your unions. That's really interesting. Okay, so a little bit of a history lesson, not a history lesson, but a bit of history. So as I said before, we're kind of 2 years on to when we first talked about this to you in a webinar. In October 2013, so pretty much exactly 2 years ago, we talked about this before, and it was myself with one of Andy's colleagues, Bethan, and the few things that have changed and developed since then that I thought would be interesting to talk about. So now I'm kind of talking about this, have a think about over the years, if you know about it. So I know a few of you have been in your current roles for a few years, or in your experience, when was the last time that changes were made in your union to your society structure, and what did those changes look like? And I'll talk to you a little bit about what I think is going on as well. Any questions?
There's a question here from Daniel about how they manage the relationships with academic staff, and how the academic staff tend to want to lead on things like this. I'll cover slightly when I come into my section, and I've made a note of it, so I'll come back to that, Daniel.
Okay, we'll make sure we cover it later on. So what's been going on? When I talked about this 2 years ago, talking about society and representation and the stuff that TSEP, the Student Engagement Partnership, does, was really when actually TSEP wasn't really established properly to go. So when we first kind of broached this, the webinar was mostly around like different stuff you can do as an academic societies, with representation being quite a small part of that. Whereas now we've seen and noticed that quite a lot more unions are doing some kind of linking up between their representation work and their societies, their academic societies. So that's definitely a rising trend. There's also been, I've noticed, more kind of trips abroad tours in this area. So that was always very much a kind of a sport, and it still definitely is dominated by sport. But I've noticed that with kind of some of the bigger companies I love touring outgoing, they now market to societies and specifically to academic societies, which is really interesting. And I think it shows that kind of community that exists there, and it's quite a strong community. And also is really interesting because it shows that kind of to the outside world, so people out of NUS and student unions are seeing academic societies as a thing, like as kind of a strong thing as a sports club. So that's interesting. I also noticed from just doing a little bit of kind of looking at student unions' websites that the diversity of activities that's going on within academic societies is improved. So that 2 years ago it was much more limited to more academic stuff, less interesting sort of socials, less trips, less things where you're actually just using the community that you've got and going and doing quite kind of random stuff. So it's definitely a rising trend, which is quite interesting. And for a few people go through it. And
I'll pick up the last couple of points there when I talk about staff relationships in a minute.
Yeah.
Linking back to the risk that we'll be talking about.
Okay, so we'll talk about the staff relationship. So Rebecca's talked about the fact that they have a student rep society. Okay, that's interesting. We can definitely talk about it in a minute too. I just thought that would be a bit of interesting context for you about where changes are happening and why we're talking about this again, really. More theoretical stuff from Andy now.
Yes, as I've sort of alluded to already, the sense of belonging that I've sort of mentioned, there is more depth to it than just sort of the surface understanding of belonging. It goes back to a piece of research done a few years ago now called What Works. Very quickly, if any of you seen this research, if you can just use the tick button to me, just an indication if you've seen it or not, and if you just do that while I talk. So essentially, the research whether it looked at why students, it was a retention exercise really to see why students drop out of university, what makes them stay and what makes people leave and these sorts of things. Essentially what they found out was that around 8% we know that around 8% of students leave HE during their first year. Of 37% of them and 42% out of 5 students think about withdrawing as well. So there's quite a students there that consider it, even if they don't go ahead with it. We don't know why they don't go ahead with it, but for whatever reason they don't, which is, we've not to prove either way, but we know they don't drop out, but we do know that 8% of students do. And reasons why they drop out are basically academic issues, feelings of isolation, and or not fitting in, which then sort of generates this idea of belonging. So it's kind of the contrary to that. So it's the idea of fitting with a community, feeling part of an environment that they're comfortable with, not feeling isolated, and knowing where they're going with it. So knowing where they'll end up at the end of their degree, and sort of the follow-on from that. It's either social mobility within that, their ability to settle with their peers or within their course and access academic content. All these sorts of things develop the sense of belonging that I'm discussing. Now, go back to your comments quickly about academic staff and why you might have seen a shift in their sort of response to this. It's become a big thing within academic communities when universities are looking at their admission rates and where they might be able to students dropping out and to keep their students engaged and to get better scores and satisfaction and things like this. They've got this idea of these committees they've got, which is why you might see people in specific roles being appointed. It's why you might see staff wanting to take an active lead in it. It's mainly so that they can control of it, if I'm being completely honest. But they're all things that you can use and harness to your advantage here. It means that there's there's an idea for them to gain support, just how much you can leverage from them. That's one thing that they're already talking about this and looking at. So asking them for some extra support, asking them for extra facilities or for money, these sorts of things, they're not questions that that put these people off. They're realistic, so long as you can not guarantee, as long as you can show that you're doing things that in prolonging the idea of that. This is where that starts to come in. So we'll move on to the next slide. Yeah. So case for belonging is essential to retention. The important strong sense of belonging, it's on a scale. So you might feel like they slightly belong, or they belong to elements, or they have full belonging. It's a passive scale, really. So it's not like a yes or no thing. It's they might feel very strong belonging or not very much at all. And normally it's as a result of engagement, they'll develop senses of strong belonging. Engagement with the institution, engagement with the yin, engagement with their peers, engagement with anything that you can think of. It's just these touching points that they have. And it's just effectively nurtured through mainstream activities. So not where special situations put in place and sort of I haven't seen initiation, that's the right special measures to interventions, that's the word I was after. To deal with the idea of these students dropping out, they feel like everyone's getting the same treatment, so it's just a part of the process. I guess the strongest thing that they want from this is to interact within academic sort of environment. So it's when activity is overtly academic, because they see that as their purpose for being at a university. They're making friends and these sorts of things are a secondary function. That academic purpose is their primary driver, which was highlighted through this research. So the more you can understand and ways for them to interact with their academic community, that you will have create a sense of belonging for them. And the stronger you can create a sense of belonging, the more you get from your academics, the more support you'll get from your institution, the easier it is to defend funding, and the easier it is to do all sorts of stuff with them. It's essentially this is a real area of impact that you can sort of show. So you can put things in place to create this sense of belonging, and you can demonstrate impact off the back of that. It's a really good way of sort of going for it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Something that I've been thinking about while you've been talking is about the kind of the staff relationship, and if it's working with institutional staff. Is there a line from the student engagement partnership on how much involvement staff should have and where that becomes unhelpful?
As I'll come on to in another slide in a minute, one of the things that they really like from this, and a way of nurturing the belonging, is through the staff relationships, staff and peer relationships. So if you can enthusiasm and their want to engage with students on a social level like this, and get them to interact and build relationships, that's all positive. That all contributes to the sense of belonging. Then you've got your boundary lines between who's responsible for these, who's driving this thing, is it students, is it staff. It definitely shouldn't be led from a point of view of it being through the union. However, if university aren't let you run them, which I know in a couple of situations, and it's about how you manage that relationship as opposed to anything else. But if it's coming through the union and it's a union society, then you're within your realms to just manage that as best as possible, to keep staff as engaged and interacting as much as possible, but not really letting them drive that.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Good. I think it's so. I'll jump on to my next slide. So a little bit about how we create and nurture that sense of belonging. So these are the four key areas that students said that contribute to the feeling of belonging. It's about their peer relations, set into social groups and to social environments, knowing they can talk to people. This is that highlighted more with students from things combined programs. So they may have very good peer networks within their social groups, but maybe not within their course environment, and that could be where they don't feel they belong, because they go into a classroom that's, let's say, history, and they sit there for one lecture, listen to the history lecture, go out and then go to a French lecture, go out and go to an economics lecture. Friends supporting them within their university, but not necessarily their academic peers. So it's fostering that relationship there where they can interact on an academic level as well as a social level. So that's one element of it. Another one is around the meaningful interaction between staff and students. So it's just lecturer turns up, has a glass of wine or a glass of orange or something, passive questions about how they feel like they're doing, and then it's about having genuine conversations with them at both a professional and a social level, and developing them relationships. Part of knowledge, confidence, and identity to be a successful HE learner. The relationship they can build within these social environments allows them to make mistakes. It allows them to not know something and be able to ask a question, learn from their peers in years above as well as their own. It depends in that around their academic arena. It's asking the questions that they wouldn't otherwise get. The mention of peer learning. This is another way of doing that type of thing. Peer learning is another sort of intervention at this stage. But sometimes, as I mentioned before, peer learning may not necessarily be seen as a mainstream activity within your institution, in which case it can be counterproductive to belonging. Peer-assisted learning is embedded and it's quite a strong thing within your institution, then that really helps. But if it's not, it can be counterproductive there. And the final one within this, the sort of how it's to find that their experience has to be relevant to their interests and future goals. So it's hard for students to see the end game when they're attending their lectures and they're sitting within their classroom environments, to be able to picture themselves doing something after they leave university and see where they're going. Someone else mentioned it in the chat window earlier about employability. This very much ties into that, and the experience of that, they should be able to talk about things, where their careers might be going, what other supports are available, what development, whether or not they need to change their modules or change their or anything like this. But it's just interactions to be able to follow that journey within their head and see where their end game is. So that's kind of how they go about this. So is there any question there for you, Rosie?
All I wanted to say on this was I just think it's really interesting. So I was reading these 4 points before. You can really clearly see a link between 4 how points, so how you create this belonging with our societies. So they are a really good way to do that. And actually, if you were thinking of how to support your academic society's development, just thinking about those 4 areas, and that's posing the question to your academic society, saying, how do you think we can support the peer relations within your groups? Can we create a better, meaningful interaction between the staff that do and work with you? Can we make sure, you get the idea? They're a really good starting point for you to start thinking about this. Only other point I was going to say is that we've said here higher education. I noticed we've got someone from a college. This is hopefully still relevant to you, but I'd be really interested in seeing kind of this in a college, because you don't tend to get as many academic societies in college. So by all means, if you've got kind of thoughts on that, if we've got a couple of people in here from colleges, then drop them in the chat bar. If there's bits where you think actually this really well, or this wouldn't work quite so well in a college environment, we'd be really interested to hear about that.
Yeah, I want to mention that this is designed specifically around the research, so that was specifically to HE students. But we had this conversation previously in CSEP within colleges and FE, HE and FE, and it very much translates in terms of college staff thinking, at least, in terms of how they see it working and how they think it would help with retention and success, and even their progression rates into university. So the idea of them transferring maybe on to do masters and things like this. And it is translatable. It does sort of cross. So yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that. In terms of your question there, Andy, around really a question so much, but the idea of the university implements their peer mentoring, and sort of blend that with your society option or provision. Great stuff. And you try and harness it and whatever. If you take that and use that to up your offer, or if it means that you get more support for your offer and better development, so if they provide training there for your students, that's perfect. All of those sort of things are really good. Out of interest, Andy, do you like the idea of them trying to to sort of that. If you just give us a sort of tick, just so I can see, quick maybe type in. He's unsure. Problem.
Oh, he's done a tick.
Oh, there we go. Tick. Oh, so it's a good thing. Okay, that's good. I wasn't sure if it was a stepping on toes thing there or not, but no, that's good. So you can work together. This is it. Yeah, the student engagement partnership. It's not just about student engagement. It's about the partnership element. So it's about harnessing that and developing that relationship. I can come in really strongly here within. It will help with the conversation of the union. This is something you can look back and say, this is definitely strong partnership work here. We're definitely working together on this. We're both benefiting from this. We're working together and all of these things to then be able to develop foundations for other conversations later on about other stuff that you might not necessarily fully agree on. So just a very quick question for you guys here. What role, if anything, do your society leaders have in developing a sense of belonging? You can just start thinking about this and jotting any ideas you've got. And do you currently do anything to support them in this? And if so, sort of how do you go about that?
It would be really good to hear from kind of everyone, even if you just jot down a couple of bullet points, just so we can kind of see a bit of a spread of what you do and what this looks like in your union. So a couple of minutes to think about this. Don't worry if it's belonging at the moment, like based on the stuff that Andy's just talked about, what will kind of society committees already have in doing that? Because they probably know that they're creating belonging anyway. No. I certainly didn't realise that was a thing until we pulled the information together for this webinar. So
yeah, that's not commonly sort of coined term. As I say, the research has been out there for a little while now, and certain groups of academics around the country, I would say there's maybe 150 academics across the country that have got this on their radar. That's quite a number of academics, to be honest, when you think of what it is. And I'd be very surprised if sort of research and marketing departments have got this on their radar or not. I very much doubt that. So it's a phrase that the student partnership used because it's and we call it that. It is recognised within a lot of other things within your. Well, I'll start going into some of the of how you can start to support that and help your society leaders to be good at developing this now briefly. So it's sort of through induction processes and through the training you deliver to them and how they can see the implications of them and how they do stuff. So when they provide productions and their actions into their societies, if they do this, what effects that has and what impact that has on belonging, what message they're putting across there, how they're putting it across, whether or not it's providing the right attitude to things, the context of stuff. You probably all realise it as other things. I don't do that, so I can't even frame this properly for you. Sorry. But them creating a sense of belonging, not just to society, so students feeling like they own the society and getting involved with running the society and having a great attachment to that. It's about them going on that and having an attachment to the union and feeling value to the union. And how times do we see students saying that they really value their society, but maybe don't necessarily value the union, or the union gets a low score of satisfaction, but they're actively involved in lots of societies. Or they may have really bad expectations and sort of experiences with their institution, but absolutely love their society. Belonging beyond that, and if you get it right, it develops that sort of relationship with both the individual activity, the society, their academic department, the union as a whole, and the institution. So it's create identity to a wider community than necessarily an individual thing. But society leaders have a big part to play in that in ensuring it works. So the support that you give them to do it and their understanding of this and the training that you give them is really important to sort of how successfully you can create this sense of belonging. Your academic societies, mind to say, our society leaders knowing this as well and appreciating the extent of that is actually quite important as well. But yeah, I think I'm over to Rosie.
Yeah, listen, put in so if anyone else wants to kind of just running into the chat that your kind of society leaders do, people feel like they belong.
Sorry, I forgot this very important slide. This one is around sort of, I've not even pulled the conversation back to things with representation really. They create these academic societies where students naturally engage and feel comfortable engaging with each other and with union and all these things is important, and this can be productive to your representation systems and to your individual reps. We know a lot of the time people are critical of their rep systems and about the impact it has around how much extent it gets and how representative that is and how legitimate that voice is that's coming through these things. Now, a lot of these conversations will be had within their social environment. We know that people are likely to complain to each other, they're more likely to moan to each other about things they dislike, or they celebrate the things they do like, talk about good and bad practice in social settings. So the idea of an academic society and where that sits within representation is it can feed representation, it can just feed other processes. Particular exchange of information, so information can come through your student leaders and through the societies to the student group that are listening to that academic area, and vice versa, you'll get information back from that. It's a reciprocal set of sort of contributions there. They will give you a lot of stuff, and they will expect a lot of stuff to come back to them, information and knowledge. You filter that and decide what that is. You might decide not to put information out there through them, or to put everything out through them. That comes down to you and your systems and how you want to use it. But it's also a great way of setting expectations. Expectations are a massive thing within belonging. People sometimes don't know what to expect from their university, and sort of, especially within the academic setting. So if you use the societies to do that and to set the right tone, it is really productive and it is useful, and it again starts to lay the foundations for that sense of belonging. Knowledge exchange is there for people to exchange ideas and information and share experiences, and it's around the balance of activity that happens in there. So is it all about just having fun? Is it all about the representation thing? Is it about harnessing information? Is it about giving information? It's about balancing that and finding out what works for you there. But most importantly, it's about breaking barriers and having a safe environment for these people to make mistakes and to ask the questions that they wouldn't feel comfortable asking within academic communities and these situations. Mm-hmm. It does all come down to the individual students, it does come down to the institution, it comes down to the background. But if we have environments like this through academic societies, where the constant base level of it's okay to ask these sorts of questions here, it's okay to do this, we will have activities that will break certain barriers and will set certain expectations, and will environment and the tone for being able to have productive and useful conversations, the role that academic societies could have, especially in representation. So it might be that you attend these things, it might be that you have specific rep positions on academic executives, your academic society executives, it might be that you get rid of your rep system altogether, you throw it in the bin and you say you're only going to do it through your academic societies. It might be that it's endless here, I could throw endless sort of examples to you. If you've got any examples yourselves of how you use academic societies for representation, again, stick that in the box for us, and we'd like to sort of harness that and use that in our sort of summary thing after this. I'm going to stop talking about the research and belonging now, and I'll hand you back to Rose.
Well, I'm going to say, Andy's just told you a lot of stuff, so if anybody has any questions about kind of anything on the screen, I'll just filter through the last couple of screens so you can have a look, because this stuff is really helpful in terms of understanding, well, a few reasons. Number one, it gets you to think about it in a different way. I think Kath's just mentioned that actually the term belonging is really helpful, so good. Also, other stuff is what your institution will be thinking about, and so if you get to think about this stuff now is really helpful, because it helps you to kind of be on the same page and helps with partnership working. So we've just given you kind of loads of different ideas. So I'll just skim through the last couple of slides and give a chance to ask any questions.
I forgot to mention as well, I lay this point when I talk about it with education-y types and sort of representative staff and things. I tell them to come and talk to you about this stuff all the time, and to share that conversation and not to work in isolation, and to just ask the question of how you might work together. So now I'm going to say the same to you, how you can work with your other colleagues within your office and within your unions and your teams, and how it might blend with other work and things, and maybe not look at it as an isolated exercise, and where it might just sit beyond that, because it's where we start to mainstream one or the representation and that being isolated to this very nerdy, geeky type stereotype, and our activities sort of stereotypes of being very active or very
the coolest people in the union.
The coolest people
obviously.
in the union, yeah, exactly. It's when we start to blend the two and create this environment where everyone's comfortable with every aspect, and that's kind of where academic societies could sit and how it could work.
I think it's just made a really good point that a lot of reps are already involved in societies anyway. So you tend to be that kind of keen bean student who just does everything. That was certainly me. I'm allowed to call them keen beans. But sometimes you just need to kind of give them permission to do that. You might just need to be like, oh, finally, I've noticed that you're a rep and you're also in your course society. Have you thought about kind of talking about the stuff that happens in your society and the conversations that you have in your society, kind of out the social? How about talking about that in your rep meetings and encouraging them to do that? Because sometimes the student involved might not necessarily see it as all linked up. They might see their rep responsibilities as a quite different thing to STEM society and going on German society socials, for example.
In Daniel and James, in fact, Daniel, because he's looking at doing exactly what we're just talking about in terms of the thinking, which was great to hear. And if you need help with that, then get in touch with us. We can definitely help with that. In fact, any of you can get in touch with Student Engagement Partnership and talk about the stuff if you'd like. And in where was it? James's, I've lost it off the screen now. Comment there about trying to link them up and the sort of the academic reps only dealing with the academic representation part. That might be the way to do it and give it an isolated sort of there and purpose to what it can do things. I know that previously, from representation's point of view, there's been frustrations around reps being given roles with university staff to run schools or do these other activities. I've always tried to keep them separate, and it might now be the case of not separate, but just redistributing where that happens. So yeah, that's absolutely fine. Sorry.
No, loads of good examples and stuff, so keep that coming because it's really helpful and it's so interesting for us to read. We've just got a couple more bits for you. So this is just some kind of things to get you talking, but you're doing really well at the chat anyway. Sorry anyone that's calling in that can't join in on the chat. We are trying to kind of relate back what's being talked about in the chat, so hopefully that's helpful. Just kind of a few things for you to think about and for you to chat in the chat bar, and Andy and I will pick up on. How have you developed your academic societies? So James is just talking about how they've had, and I know James has changed roles, changed unions a couple of times, so he might not be talking about Imperial, I'm not sure. But he said that they have put a rep position on the committee, on the societies committee, and that their role is kind of the representative stuff. Yeah, he gives us Nottingham Trent. So that's an idea, and it's just how he's developed academic societies. A couple of you are talking about other different things, so keep those kind of thoughts coming through. Written on here, what support need is it different with the clubs and societies? Because I think a lot of the stuff that Andy and I have talked to you about today actually applies to all of your student groups in some way or another. But is there anything specific that you think your academic societies need that's different? And share your good ideas. So, is there any stuff that you think? Actually, I'm going to do a bit of talking about this because I'm going to share my good idea with the others. And now, so just give you a couple of minutes to write things down. If there's anything else that you think might be helpful for others to know about, and then we'll be finishing off. So no pressure, but I'd like you all to write something down.
No, as well, I've just got it on my notepad here about student rep societies. I can't remember who it was that brought it up.
Yeah.
But absolutely, not a problem.
It was Rebecca.
Okay. Hi, Rebecca. Thank you. Yes, the idea of student rep societies is something that's been around for a while. I think it's a way of them interacting and feeling like, actually they belong to a big. They don't work in isolation. And in terms of that, yes, that works really well. But it may be that by having the interacting on a level with their individual, the individual academic societies, that they get that level of interaction that they're after, that they look for through the academic rep society through that. Or it might be that it's a completely different thing. I don't know for what purpose the academic rep society is there for. So it's all academic, or anything where you put people together to talk about like-minded things is all good. But in terms of belonging, absolutely great, Rebecca. So yeah, that's good. Thank you.
And I did a link, Andy O'Hara, not Andy, has just posted a handy link talking about points-based systems, getting them to do more types of activities. So, and he's actually put a link in there. So have a look. Anything like that, we're going to kind of jot all this stuff down into a briefing paper afterwards, and we'll put it on the Student Opportunities Resource Hub. So if anyone else has any other links to websites that would be useful for other people to see, put them down. We're going to finish off now because the person who's doing the next webinar in the series is kind of hovering at the door in our webinar room at NUS, and we've just got to our last slide. So Andy and my email addresses are on the slide for you to take down if you've got any questions. A couple of your links down in the chat, that's so helpful, thank you. And it's just, if anybody has any questions at this stage, so anything that we've talked about or questions for each other, we've got kind of 3 or 4 minutes now to answer any questions that you've got. So whether it's related to one of the specific things that Andy's talked about, or whether it's asking everyone's opinion on a way to do something, definitely those down. And Andy said that he's popped his address down there for you to be able to chat about that. Any questions? As I said at the start, the slides from this show will be available online, and this recording will also be available on the NUS webinar page, which is in the Strong Students Union section of NUS Connect. It's pretty fine because we've just restructured NUS Connect, so you can find things now, which is super. As I've just said, we did a briefing paper 2 years ago when we did a webinar about academic societies, and Andy and I are going to quickly jot down all the kind of key thoughts that have come out of today, any questions, and pop them down into an almost academic societies 2 briefing with a few more thoughts, and we'll include any of the links that you're all popping down, so keep putting them down if you've got stuff that you think I'd like to look at. By all means, email us if you're interested in anything we've talked about, or if you want any support with any of this stuff. And then my final kind of ask from you is, we have, as I said before, we've got our Student Ops webinar scheduled up until Christmas, but post-Christmas we'll be doing more webinars. So if there's anything that you would like NUS to cover, whether that's Student Ops thing or thing from across organisations, so it could be about NUS Extra, or it could be about the policy stuff that we do. If you've got any thoughts or ideas that you would like us to cover in this same format, so in a webinar format, then pop them in the chat bar or email me about those, and I will see what I can do about getting those into a webinar for next year. That we've got coming up we're doing one about student media at the beginning of December, with Ensley and with our press office here. We're reading about kind of the legal stuff around student media. And I'm also doing a Student Volunteering Week webinar in early December in the same week, where we talk about how you can engage with Student Volunteering Week. And finally, I'm doing a webinar for your activities SABs. So anyone that came to Lead and Change Student Opportunities, we're kind of a 6-month follow-up webinar where I remind them all of the stuff that they learned and remind them of all of the things that they said they're going to do, and give them some support in making sure that all happens. So make sure that if they're useful to you, you join in with those.
If any of you, Andy just put there that there's a lot more he could say, but he didn't want to tell you about. If anyone's got stuff they want to talk about this in terms of good practice they've got in terms of engaging staff and sort of just of academic societies and where they think it might link to belonging, I'd be really interested in seeing that, and Rosie would as well.
Yeah.
So if you can just jot that email and send it to both of us, or one of us, and we'll make sure the other one sees it, because we're going to be doing some more work on student engagement partnership, and it would be a really good place for us to start from, as opposed to not, as it were. So yeah, please do put that down on email. Anything you've got to send that you think would be good for us, then send it over to me.
Yeah. So thank you, Andy, for joining us today and for telling us about all the cool things that you talked about. Thanks everyone for participating. I copy the chat feed so that we've got that as a record. So if there's any else that wants to say, you've literally got a minute now to pop them down. Otherwise, the next webinar person's going to shout at me. So we do have to finish now. So thanks so much for participating. You've all been really good at chatting and sharing your ideas, which is so helpful because we don't have all the answers. You have more than us. So keep sharing and look out for the briefing that we'll send out as soon as we finish writing it. Hopefully not too soon, not too long away, but we'll do our best to do it quickly for you. About to go to Zone's conference, so probably won't be finished till next week. So yeah, that's all. List for people interested in development of academic groups. Interesting. Yeah, we have a little mini mailing list. So if everyone just wants to make sure they've written everything that they need to, if you've got any questions, stick them down now and we'll answer those via email. I'm going to stop recording now because I just realised that's recorded and now it's going to be on NUS's YouTube channel forever. How embarrassing. But thank you.